Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Glasgow Times news podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW. Or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information at CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcast and give us any constructive feedback.
From the Glasgow Times, Thursday the 5th of May 2022, from the news section, ScotRail staff threatened to boycott Glasgow route due to behaviour of young team, by Stacey Mullen and Ellie Forbes. ScotRail staff threatened to boycott troubled routes played by unruly passengers after a ticket examiner was left traumatised trying to eject brawling teens from a train. The train crew member was confronted by a gang of youths hitting a younger boy with a bottle and pouring alcohol over him on a ballot to Glasgow service on Sunday. She contacted the British Transport Police but was told that officers had been diverted to deal with a trespasser on another line and did not arrive until after it was over. The Rail, Maritime and Transport Union said staff would boycott trouble spots if action was not taken. The ticket examiner says she feels her safety has been jeopardised every day at work and that it's taking its toll on her mental and physical health. She said, "I was aware the notorious young team, about 15 to 20 young teenage boys, boarded the service at Alexandria. One of them, who was wearing a light green hoodie and carrying a bottle of alcohol, headed towards three boys and challenged one of them, then proceeded to hit one of them with his bottle and poured alcohol all over him. By this point, the rest of the young team were all bundled into that compact area and were going nuts. Two of them were physically attacking one of the boys. The other two boys just sat in shock looking terrified as their pal got beaten up. I shouted to them to get off the train and no one was listening. When we got to Rainton, as I was physically removing some of the young team off the train, they were trying to push past me to get back on. However, I was stood firm in the doorway and had to shout to the driver to shut the door. The boys were continuing to shout abuse and trying to figure out a way to get back on. Luckily, the doors closed and we got away. The young boy who suffered the attack was too scared to report anything, but what I witnessed was a horrific ordeal. I feel traumatised at what I have witnessed and I feel physically sick. My blood pressure was sky high. Every day I come to work I feel my safety has been jeopardised. This is taking its toll on my mental and physical health. I am not happy with the British Transport Police response. BTP turned up, took a brief statement and advised me they had been en route to my incident but were told to turn around and go to another incident at Hillington involving a trespasser. I feel like some unknown trespasser took priority over my own safety and that of paying customers. She said she had to end her shift early because of the incident and would not be returning to duty until further notice. RMT Scotland organiser Mick Hogg said there should be more police patrols on trains and that at least two ticket examiners on every service rather than the current single one. He said, "If the situation does not get fixed, RMT and ASLEF will instruct our members not to run trains to the affected hotspots or routes until staff can go to work and be safe. Our railway is becoming a magnet for antisocial behaviour and nothing is getting done about it. It's just a matter of time before there is a fatality." Chief Superintendent Jill Murray, BTP Scotland's commander, has already warned of an emerging threat of youth antisocial behaviour on trains and buses. In March, Transport Minister Jennifer Ruth agreed to consider an RMT call for a new law to ban disruptive passengers from ScotRail like they can be from football grounds. A BTP spokesperson said, "Through partnerships with working with ScotRail and Police Scotland, we're working tirelessly to deter criminality and antisocial behaviour on the railway network, and we have been increasing patrols on the Balloch line using targeted operations to deter offending. Where offences involving youth take place, We regularly engage with schools and campus officers to identify those responsible and deal with them accordingly. We will take action as the railway needs to be a safe place for everyone using it. ScotRail Security and Crime Manager Stephen Elliott said, "The safety of our customers and employees is our number one priority. Antisocial behaviour, whether that's physical violence, verbal abuse or any other form, is completely unacceptable. Everyone has the right to go about their day in peace, so we'll continue to work with authorities to ensure that anyone responsible for antisocial behaviour is brought to justice." In the articles by Stacey Mullen and Ellie Forbes. From the Glasgow Times, Thursday the 5th of May 2022, from the news section, "Teen missing since Monday found safe and well" by Nicole Mitchell. A teenage girl who went missing on Monday has been found safe and well. Stephanie Murdoch had last been seen on Monday at around 5:30pm in Westwood Gardens in Paisley. On Tuesday, police issued an appeal to find the 14-year-old who was wearing a fawn-coloured tracksuit and white trainers. Now, officers have confirmed Stephanie has been found safe and well and thanked the public for their help in sharing and responding to the appeal. And that piece was by Nicole Mitchell. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the news section, "Body found in Port Glasgow as police probe unexplained death" by Lorraine Tinney. A man's body has been found in Port Glasgow, with police treating his death as unexplained. The grim discovery was made in the early hours of this morning, reports her sister title, the Greenock Telegraph. Emergency services were called to the scene in a lane between Lilybank Road and Glenburn Road just after 1am. Police say they attended following a report of a man being injured, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Detective Inspector Nicola Wake of Greenock CID said officers received a report of a man having been found injured in the lane between Lilybank Road and Glenburn Street in Port Glasgow around 12:40am. Emergency services attended and the man was pronounced dead at the scene. The death has been treated as unexplained and inquiries are ongoing to establish the full circumstances. Police sealed off roads in a residential area of Port Glasgow as their probe got underway. Uniformed officers blocked Lilybank Road at Glenpark Drive by the bridge and were standing guard at the scene with no traffic allowed through. The situation affected access to nearby St John's Primary School. The school said, "Due to an ongoing police incident, access to the school building is limited. Lilybank Road, the bridge, the hill at the Glen and the underpass are all closed. Please find alternative routes to school and take care. Anyone with information is urged to contact Greenock CID on 101, quoting incident number 0095 of May the 6th, or call Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. That's 0800 555 111. And that report was by Lorraine Tinney. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the news section, "Man accused of throwing cup at Barry Mackay during Celtic match" by Connor Gordon, court reporter. A man is accused of assaulting a Hearts player Barry Mackay during a match against Celtic. Zach Griffiths, 24, allegedly threw a cup at the winger at Parkhead on December the 2nd, 2021. Griffiths faces an alternative charge of behaving in a threatening or an abusive manner at the same time and place. Court papers state Griffiths threw a cup onto the field of play in close proximity to a football player. Celtic won the match 1-0 with Kyogo Furuhashi netting in the first half. Griffiths, of Aberdeen, has made no plea at the Glasgow Sheriff Court to either charge. A hearing today was continued without plea until later this month. And that article is by Connor Gordon. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the news section, "Motherwell woman suddenly dies, leaving huge hole in devastated family." Exclusive by Kirsty Fierick. A woman has suddenly died, leaving a huge hole in her devastated family. Tributes are pouring in for Kerry Gibbons, who died in her sleep a week before her 28th birthday. The 27-year-old, from Motherwell, was born with a rare genetic condition called Apert syndrome and also battled epilepsy. Despite her health conditions, she was always an outgoing character and a half, making her loss devastating. She passed away on Thursday, April the 28th, with her death being ruled as unexplained at this time. It comes after Kerry's father suddenly passed away in 2020 from a heart condition, with her family now saying she's back in her dad's arms. Loved one Nicole Norman told the Glasgow Times, "Kerry was a character and a half. She was always full of dramatics and a girly girl. She loved handbags, nail polishes and makeup. She was forever pinching them off anyone she could. Kerry loved her family loads and kept them on their toes with her antics. Her death was sudden and at this moment is unexplained. They think it's most likely epilepsy related. Kerry's presence was felt by anyone she was around, and the fact she is gone has left a huge hole in the family no one could ever come close to filling." A GoFundMe has been set up to raise funds for Kerry's funeral to give her the send-off she deserves. The page reads, "There's so much we could say about Kerry Gibbons. Outgoing, well-loved, well-known, drama queen, quite the character and always full of mischief. But her sudden and tragic death at the age of 27 was one thing the family never imagined they'd have to say. We are raising funds in the hope we can give Kerry the send-off she deserves and the one we know she'd want for her final journey back to her dad's arms. Rest in peace, Kerry Gibbons." And that article was an exclusive by Kirsty Feerick. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the news section, "Mum jailed for horrific neglect of Glasgow tot Lauren Wade, who died, freed early," by Connor Gordon, court reporter. A woman jailed for the horrific neglect of her toddler daughter has been freed early, but does not want to appear at a probe into the child's death. Margaret Wade, 41, Murray Sweeney, 40, left Lauren Wade to starve to death in their filthy flat in Glasgow Sighthill. A judge heard how the 2-year-old went without proper food or care for months and was riddled with thousands of head lice. On March 20, 2015, a 999 call was made after the child was found to be unresponsive. A skinny and dirty Lauren had a sodden nappy, bald patches and thousands of head lice. She was rushed to hospital, but around 30 minutes later was pronounced dead. Prosecutor Bill McVicker said, "Paramedics later noticed that the cover she had been lying on was covered with lice and fleas. They had to clean and decontaminate the ambulance." Wade told nurses Lauren had been suffering from a virus for a couple of days. A post-mortem revealed the toddler had been the victim of severe neglect. The highest court in Glasgow heard Lauren died due to complications with malnutrition. Wade later told police she had no guilt over her daughter's death. The pair were jailed in 2019 for 6 years and 4 months each. The duo, who had been accused of killing Lauren, pleaded guilty to the reduced charge of neglecting the toddler between June 14th and March 2015. A fatal accident inquiry, FAI, will take place in July at Glasgow Sheriff Court. At the preliminary hearing today, Selina Brown, representing the Crown, stated the FAI could last 5 weeks. She added, "This can be reduced a significant amount with the agreement on background. There are 22 witnesses at the moment." Lee Doyle, representing Sweeney, said, "Myself and the agents for Miss Wade have applied for legal aid. The start date does not place difficulty on me, and this is a case which I will construct counsel in. My client is still in custody, and Miss Wade isn't. Both have done 3.5 years, and Miss Wade was released last month. My client is due for parole in October. I imagine she would want to participate and hear what's been said." Darren Fleming, representing Wade, was asked by Sheriff Principal Craig Turnbull whether she will appear. He replied, "She doesn't wish to. She was released on parole at the start of March after a lengthy hearing." Sheriff Turnbull fixed a further hearing for the end of next month. And that article is by Connor Gordon. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the news section, Natalie McGarry tells embezzlement trial that she forgot to pay a firm for media training, by Connor Gordon, court reporter. Former MP Natalie McGarry told her embezzlement trial that she forgot to pay a firm for media training. McGarry, 40, was shown to have made a cheque out to herself for £2,000 from a Glasgow SNP branch in April 2015. She claimed this was to cover a bill from enterprise screening to McGarry, who was then treasurer and convener of the Glasgow Regional Association, GRA, of the SNP. But the bill, jurors heard, went unpaid. The ex-politician claimed that it was an error which she didn't follow through correctly, but was not deliberate. McGarry, who represented Glasgow East for the SNP, allegedly stole more than £25,000 from two organisations advocating for Scottish independence between April 2013 and August 2015. McGarry is said to have embezzled £21,000 while Treasurer for Women for Independence, WFI, between April 26, 2013 and November 30th, 2015. A second charge states that McGarry took £4,661 between April 9th, 2014 and August 10, 2015, when she was Treasurer, Secretary and Convener of the GRA. McGarry, of Clarkston, Eastern Renfrewshire, denies the two charges at Glasgow Sheriff Court. The court has heard in evidence that McGarry organised media training for potential SNP candidates prior to the 2015 general election. The jury was shown a range of cheques made out by the GRA while McGarry was Treasurer and Convener. Defence Counsel Alan MacLeod asked, "You have a cheque to you on April the 28th for £2,000. What was that for?" "This is my error. We had media training earlier on that month and we used the company enterprise screen." Mr MacLeod: "We heard from an employee at Enterprise who said that the bill was not paid. Can you explain that?" McGarry: "I can only say on this one issue I didn't follow through correctly. It wasn't until 2018 when I saw the charges. I had no idea the bill was not paid." Mr MacLeod: "You said that the failures to pay the bill was an omission. How was that made?" McGarry: "I was waiting for feedback at that point in time. I usually make a bank transfer for them. I was going to pay it through my bank account, but the date was before the election. I was waiting on them sending feedback and the company didn't send a reminder." Mr MacLeod asked if it was true McGarry did not pay the money the company was due, and she replied, "Yes, it is." Mr MacLeod said, "Did you deliberately withhold that money for your own purposes?" McGarry: "No, absolutely not. It was just before my election as an MP, and I had used them before, and they're a family friend. I didn't have no intention to pay." McGarry was earlier asked why the cheque for the £2,000 did not match the stub which read Shettleston SNP for £250. She stated that she was bad at filing cheque stubs in. McGarry added that the £250 raised to one of the four payments from the GRA to the Glasgow branches fighting by-elections at the time. She added, "I can't remember what branches in particular. I think I just took a punt putting it in." McGarry was also quizzed about a £600 cheque payment from the GRA to a property consultancy firm who did a survey of her constituency office. Jurors heard evidence that Parliamentary Expenses IPSA body covered the bill and reimbursed McGarry. McGarry claimed that IPSA had not been paid for several flights to London, costing £600 from parliamentary business. The trial continues before Sheriff Tom Hughes. That was an article by Connor Gordon.
This article is from The National, date 6th May 2022, from the Culture section. Channel 4's Unfair, premiere for series inspired by the lives of show people in Glasgow. By Craig Meechan. They say, write what you know, and Emma Lennox has done just that. Her debut series Unfair premieres today, and it's one that's been years in the making. The Glasgow writer, originally from Fife, has been inspired by her own life. She moved into a showman's yard in the East End of Glasgow with her now husband Mitch, not knowing a great deal about fairground life. Now, Lennox, described by Channel 4 as one of the UK's exciting new talents, has been given her TV breakthrough, inspired by her life on the yard in a city with the highest density of show people in Europe. Unfair follows the story of Sorcha, cat Ronnie, a clueless student who moves into a showman's yard with her boyfriend Bentley, Dylan Wood. Sorcha has fallen out with her own family and is desperate to fit in with Bentley's, but she knows nothing of show people culture. Made by Skye-based company Young Films, Lennox hopes it'll fill Scots with laughter while accurately representing an underserved community. With Unfair, she said, I really just wanted to show, because there's so many misconceptions, that it's just families living here just like anywhere else really. I wanted to have a clash of cultures comedy situation that happens to be set in a showman's yard. Lennox told The National it was vital she worked with an organisation like Fair Scotland, a group dedicated to promoting the heritage of Scottish show people and fairground culture. She said, I'm basing the story off my own experiences, but without that support from the community, I wouldn't be able to make it, and I wouldn't want to make it either. I know how damaging some media has been to the community over the years, so I wouldn't want to do something that's added to that. The programme was filmed in a real showperson's yard in Shettleston and will see appearances from the In-Betweeners Joe Thomas and Outlanders Grant O'Rourke. The show also comes after a victory for the community, which has been fighting to have showman women appear as an ethnic group option on the 2022 Scottish census. More than anything, though, it's a comedy first and foremost, Lennox said. And I'm not trying to represent the entire show people community. That is just my little perspective of it. It's really a story about family. But I do think having at least this one story that is a bit more of a positive thing of actual people in amongst a sea of myths and misconceptions will hopefully make people think twice about what they think show people are. Lennox added that the representation of Scotland generally was lacking in the media. She said, there are so many sides in Glasgow, not to mention the whole of Scotland, that isn't seen on screen. We just don't get enough made up here altogether. There's just not the breadth of voices to tell the stories, so to get this comedy made, it just feels amazing. It feels like it's up against the odds, and I would hope we're getting to a place where more voices are going to come through more. Yana Harris, in her debut acting role as Missouri, said it was an important step for show people like her to be used as more than just a plot device. She said Unfair was everything a comedy should be. She said, I'm so happy to see this is being made. I did an internship over the summer helping with a project collecting information about hate crime towards travelling communities. And my job was to collect media about show people or about travellers in general. I was just collecting articles on anything that had the buzzword gypsy or traveller and any depictions I could find. It was really scary and upsetting. I always knew what the world was like. I experienced it as a show person my whole life. But to see it written down, how much media there is out there against us. I tried to collect rebuttals as well, and unbalanced is not a strong enough word for what I found. So for Emma to make a show where the whole story is about show people, and they're not deified or made perfect, as a comedy these people are interesting, intricate, flawed characters. They're human and loving and well-rounded like a person should be. They are three-dimensional characters. I think that's the only way to combat the media that's out there against us. So this is the first step towards equality, I think, for travelling communities. Unfair will premiere on Channel 4's All 4 on Friday, May 6th. That article was by Craig Meehan. This article is from the Glasgow Times, date 6th May 2022. From the Lifestyle section. Dave Myers, Hairy Biker's star undergoing cancer treatment. By Carlo Simone. Hairy Biker star Dave Myers has revealed that he is undergoing treatment for cancer. The 64-year-old has not disclosed what the type of cancer is and says that the year will now be a write-off. Dave revealed he was fighting the disease on the Hairy Biker's Agony Uncles podcast, opening up to his fellow hairy biker and cooking partner, Cy King. He said, "I haven't been too well recently, and basically I've got to have some chemo. You know all this anyway, so this year is going to be a bit quiet for me. I'm not going to be filming. Some of the festivals I'm not going to be able to go to. Some may be okay, but this year's a bit of a write-off for us. I've had to speak up about this because I don't want to hide under a rock, but I would love it if people respected my privacy and just let me get on with it and give Cy and our team all the support they need. That would be great. But look, the prognosis is okay. I'm going to be fine." He continued, "I've just got to tuck in, look after myself, eat sensibly and get over this mess. Flog books and be a happy person, so within that, that's where I am. I may be a baldy biker for a while, so it's just a warning. I don't want to make a fuss about it. I look all right bald, actually." Myers and King have known each other since the 1990s and made their first television appearance as the Hairy Bikers in the 2004 BBC programme The Hairy Bikers Cookbook. Since then, they've presented many different travelogue programmes, combining that with cooking. That article was by Carlo Simone. This article is from The National, date 6th May 2022, from the News section. McCall's retail group on brink of collapse with thousands of jobs at risk. By Angus Cochrane. Thousands of jobs are at risk as convenience store chain McCall's teeters on the brink of collapse. The retailer has been in discussions with potential lenders to shore up the business, which struggled heavily during the pandemic due to supply chain issues, inflation and a heavy debt burden. It said that unless those talks are successful, it is increasingly likely that the group would be placed into administration. The business has some 16,000 employees, the majority of whom are part-time, a spokesman said. In a statement in which it described itself as the UK's leading community retailer, a representative said, "As previously disclosed on April 25, 2022, the group remains in discussions regarding potential financing solutions for the business to resolve short-term funding issues and create a stable platform for the business going forward." However, whilst no decision has been yet made, McCall's confirms that unless an alternative solution can be agreed in the short term, it is increasingly likely that the group will be placed into administration with the objective of achieving a sale of the group to third-party purchaser and securing the interests of creditors and employees. Even if a successful outcome is achieved, it is likely to result in little or no value being attributed to the group's ordinary shares. The spokesman said a further update would be made as and when appropriate. Asked about a report by Sky News that administrators could be called in as early as Friday, he said there would be no comment beyond the statement issued on Thursday. Earlier this week, it was revealed the group was set to have its shares suspended from the London Stock Exchange, as bosses said they would be unable to get its accounts signed off by auditors in time. Shares in the company had already plunged, as it reported last month that talks with its lenders and banks would likely leave shareholders empty-handed under rescue efforts. The group runs more than 1,100 convenience shops across England, Scotland and Wales. Aris McCall was founded by Robert Smith McCall, a footballer for Rangers, Queen's Park, Newcastle United and Scotland, and his brother Tom in 1901, and the group was set up in 1973. That article was by Angus Cochrane. This article is from The National, date 6th May 2022, from the News section. More than 30 arrested after Just Stop Oil blockade New Star Clydebank. By Angus Cochrane. More than 30 people have been arrested and charged after climate activists targeted a Scottish oil facility. Just Stop Oil blockaded the New Star Clydebank facility in Western Bartonshire in support of their demand that the government ends new oil and gas projects in the UK. The protest began at about 4 a.m. on Tuesday when activists climbed on top of tankers and locked onto the entrance, while others entered the oil terminal, where some sat on pipes and some on the silos to halt operations. Just Stop Oil said the protesters were there for about 60 hours before the action ended on Thursday, which the group believes is the longest occupation of an oil terminal in the UK. Police Scotland said 31 people were arrested and charged in connection with a number of offences. The force said 15 had been charged with breach of the peace and 16 with a contravention of a section of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, which relates to trespass and alleged malicious mischief. Chief Superintendent Lynn Ratcliffe said, "As a rights-based organisation, Police Scotland puts our values of integrity, fairness, respect and a commitment to upholding human rights at the heart of everything we do. This means that we will protect the rights of people who wish to peacefully protest or counter-protest, balanced against the rights of the wider community." Police said reports will be sent to the Procurator Fiscal in due course. It was the first action of its kind in Scotland since the Just Stop Oil coalition began blockading fuel terminals south of the border on April 1st, leading to more than 1,000 arrests. A UK government spokesman said, "We will not bend to the will of activists who naively want to extinguish North Sea oil and gas production. Doing so would put energy security and British jobs at risk and simply increases foreign imports while not reducing demand. We are committed to a strong North Sea industry as we transition away from expensive fossil fuels over the coming decades, and our recent British energy security strategy sets out a long-term plan to ramp up cheap renewables and nuclear energy." That article was by Angus Cochrane. This article is from The National, date 6th May 2022, from the Culture section. Nicola Sturgeon backs drive to get Scots to read for just 6 minutes a day, by Jane MacLeod. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and other top Scottish politicians have given their support to a campaign to get Scots reading for 6 minutes on May 11th, to help boost their mental health and well-being. Party leaders Nicola Sturgeon, Anna Sarwar, Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater were joined by Stephen Kerr to give their backing to the Keep the Heed and Read campaign, which has already had more than 173,000 minutes pledged to the national reading movement. The Scotland-wide initiative aims to promote positive and easy-to-implement changes, with research showing that reading for 6 minutes a day can reduce stress by 68% in people across all ages. With Mental Health Week starting this Monday, the Keep the Heed and Read campaign is encouraging Scots to take stock and establish a regular reading habit. For more, visit keeptheheed.scot. That article was by Jane MacLeod.
Glasgow Times News on Monday the 9th of May. Evening meals for homeless in hotels stopped by City Council. An article written by Stuart Patterson, political correspondent. Evening meals for homeless people being accommodated in hotels in Glasgow have been stopped. Glasgow City Council has been housing more people in hotels since the pandemic and providing them with breakfast, lunch and an evening meal. The policy has contributed to a reduction in rough sleeping in the city, with the council reporting the number of people sleeping on the streets is down to single figures. The evening meal was withdrawn last Monday, with breakfast and lunches still being provided. The operators of a soup kitchen in Glasgow city centre said they have noticed an increase in homeless people attending in the last week. Colin McInnes of Homeless Project Scotland said, "We're concerned for people's welfare when they can't afford a hot meal. These are people who can't afford to buy food and the council is taking it away from them." Glasgow City Council has a legal duty under Section 29 of the Housing Scotland Act of 1987 to provide emergency accommodation to those it believes are homeless and which the council must pay for in order to provide emergency homeless provision as and when required. The council said, "Due to the amount of wastage of evening meals and the general consensus of service users being they like the lunches and breakfast, we stopped the evening meals. The provision of meals was brought in during the pandemic because there was nowhere to go or open for people to access food due to lockdown." As well as hotels, an overnight welcome centre has been in operation in the city to replace an old winter night shelter. People in the centre, operated by Glasgow City Mission, have been accommodated in their own ensuite rooms with food provided, instead of the old facility, where up to 40 people slept on a mattress in a hall in the East End premises of the Lodging House Mission, also operated by the Glasgow City Mission. Earlier this year, the Glasgow Times reported how the owners of 2 hotels, used by the council to accommodate homeless people, were paid almost £2 million over the last 10 years by the council. The owners of the Alexander Thompson Hotel in Argyle Street and the Charles Rennie Mackintosh Hotel in Union Street were paid £1.85 million. The Alexander Thompson received the most, with £1,575,000 paid to the owners, and the Charles Rennie Mackintosh, which was paid £275,000. An article written by Stuart Patterson. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 9th of May. Glasgow Minister appointed as a chaplain to Her Majesty the Queen. An article written by Esther Tarnay, reporter. A Glasgow minister has been invited to join Her Majesty the Queen's household as a chaplain. Reverend Dr. Grant Barclay, who's currently serving the city as a Church of Scotland minister, will become a chaplain in ordinary. He said, "I'm honoured to be invited to serve as chaplain to the Queen in Scotland, and am humbled to stand in a tradition of Christian service to the monarch which has continued for nearly 600 years. I consider it a privilege to be able to offer Christian ministry to the Queen and the royal household." The role is mostly a ceremonial honour, with members of the Chapel Royal taking part in formal state occasions and conducting services at significant national events. There are 10 chaplains to the Queen in Scotland, each normally retiring at the age of 70. Reverend Dr. Barclay was the moderator of Irvine and Kilmarnock Presbytery in 2010, convened the Council of Assembly from 2012 until 2016, and is currently the convener of the General Assembly's Legal Questions Committee. He and his wife Karen have 3 adult children, Katie, Andrew and Kirsten. Reverend Professor David Ferguson, Dean of the Chapel Royal in Scotland, said, "I'm delighted to learn that Her Majesty has appointed Dr. Grant Barclay to the Chapel Royal in Scotland. He'll bring extensive experience of ministry and leadership at local, regional and national levels to the work of the Chapel Royal. His wisdom and acumen is widely recognised throughout the Church." An article written by Esther Tarnay. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 9th of May. Glasgow's pantries members rising as locals struggle with bills. An exclusive article written by Lauren Brownlee, senior reporter. A Lifeline Glasgow pantry has noticed a sharp rise in members since fuel and energy costs have gone up in recent months. Around 300 new people have signed up to Pollock Pantry over the last few weeks, with some revealing to the staff and volunteers just how much they're struggling. The community store, which first opened nearly a year ago, allows customers to purchase between 10 and 15 grocery items for just £2.50. Manager Tracy Galligan, who is originally from the area but now lives in Barrhead, has been involved since day one. She works at the pantry along with 5 dedicated volunteers. The 52-year-old said, "I absolutely love working at the pantry. I'm very passionate about it. I call it my baby because I've been there since the very start. I stack the first shelf and things like that. I love the customers as well. It's really nice getting to know the locals. We're up at 1,000 active members now, so it's really busy. There's a big need for the pantry. Roughly, we have between 70 and 90 customers a day coming in. A lot of people come in and say they couldn't do without it now. It's a lifeline to them. That's what a lot of people say. They tell us they don't know what they would do without us." Located on Brockburn Road, the pantry is open Monday, Tuesday and Thursday between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. and 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. every Saturday. Members pay £1 per month and can shop up to 4 times a week. Free sanitary items are also provided. Tracy said, "We have members that work that can't make ends meet. There's no criteria, so we don't ask any questions and let everyone use it. Some of them need to use it 4 times a week because they have families. Coming in the 4 different times makes a difference to them because they're getting a lot of variety." I had someone the other day in tears. She said she had absolutely nothing. So it was good to take her around and give her loads of shopping. Another person came in after just being made redundant and they couldn't believe it. They were absolutely devastated and said they didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know how they were going to make ends meet. It's really sad. Food stock is provided by Fair Share due to the pantry paying a charity a yearly fee for the service. This is then topped up by Tracy going out shopping for items with the takings made from members. Meanwhile, people, businesses and organisations in the local community also donate food and cash. Due to being so busy, Tracy has found herself constantly stocking up. She said, "We've seen a big increase since energy prices and petrol prices have gone up. I say we've had about 300 new members in the past 2 months. I'm restocking 3 times a week, but the pantry is very important for some people. It's essential for them, to be honest. The prices in supermarkets are just outrageous at the moment, so people do need it. It makes such a difference to people's lives. I love how it makes people happy when they leave the shop. I love the smile on their faces. It's just amazing to watch them come in and get their shop and go, wow, that box of cereal is £3.50 in such and such supermarket. And I'm like, yeah. They say, I can't believe I get all this for £2.50. That's what makes it all worthwhile for me. And that's the type of reaction we get from lots of people who come in for the first time. They can't believe it. The much-loved pantry was born out of an idea during the coronavirus pandemic. Andy Pilline, a founding member of Swamp, a forward-thinking community development trust based in Pollock, decided there was a need for it after the charity, along with others, set up community helpline G53 Together to help locals during COVID-19, and thousands of emergency food parcels were being handed out. Despite most restrictions now lifted, the helpline is still helping Pollock residents in dozens of different ways. Tracy said, "Somebody will phone the helpline distressed and say they've no money and can't put their heating on, and they've cancelled all their direct debits. They get the help they need and are then recommended to come into the pantry for their food. I was volunteering on the helpline before being asked to work in the pantry. I started off with 12 hours and I'm up to 35 now, but I love it." Pollock Pantry, which costs just £1 a month to become a member, is always looking for cash and food donations from anyone who's able to help. An exclusive article written by Lauren Brownlee. Glasgow Times News on Monday the 9th of May. Scottish Power boss urges £1,000 bill cut for $10 million. An article written by Emilia Kettle, SEO journalist. The boss of Scottish Power has warned that millions of customers could face a horrific winter unless energy firms get a major government intervention. Speaking to the BBC, the chief executive of Scottish Power, Keith Anderson, said that another expected rise in energy bills in October of between £2,500 and £3,000 could see huge losses for suppliers and many customers unable to pay their bills. He warned the regulator Ofgem that setting the new price cap too low could force suppliers to collapse or foreign-owned firms to leave the market. Discussing his plan to tackle the potential crisis, Mr Anderson said that he's called for 10 million households to have their energy bills reduced by £1,000 this October. He also said that the government plan to give each household £200 towards energy bills would not be enough. He told the BBC, "We need to be realistic about the gravity of the situation. Around 40% of UK households, potentially 10 million homes, could be in fuel poverty this winter." Currently, the government has said it will offer extra relief of £150 in April via the council tax system in England. Plus, in October, customers in England, Scotland and Wales will receive a £200 rebate on energy bills. But this will then have to be repaid at £40 a year across 5 years, starting in April 2023. However, Mr Anderson said a £10 billion tariff reduction fund could be paid for by adding £40 annually to all household energy bills for the next decade. He added that it would be the most effective way to avoid fuel poverty for the most vulnerable. In terms of energy firms, Mr. Anderson said that energy companies could collapse if their customers are unable to pay their bills. An article written by Emilia Kettle.
Evening Times, May 9. Lifestyle, Memories. Toffee Bob was best Scottish footballer of his day. Report by Anne Fotheringham. The sad news that R.S. McCall's has collapsed is the end of an era. But who was Robert Smythe McCall? Best known as the man whose name appears over the doors of around 300 newsagents in the UK, Robert Smythe McCall was also one of the greatest footballers of his day. He scored 13 goals for Scotland, and in the 1900 game against England at Celtic Park, which Scotland won 4-1, he scored a hat-trick. Born in Glasgow in 1876, Robert started playing football with the junior club Ben More in 1892 and moved to Queen's Park 2 years later. He scored 6 goals in a league game against Port Glasgow Athletic for Queen's Park, a record which has never been broken. Robert also played for Newcastle United for 3 years, before returning to Glasgow in 1904 to play for Rangers. He returned to Queen's Park in 1907. In 1901, Robert and his brother Tom opened their first store in Albert Drive in Glasgow. Robert became known as Toffee Bob as a result. The business grew quickly, and in 1916 they opened a factory to supply 30 branches with sweets. In the 30s, branches opened in England, and the shops started selling newspapers and cigarettes. By 1935, the firm employed more than 800 people. Robert was inducted into the Scottish Football Hall of Fame in November 2011. He is the only player to have scored a hat-trick against each of the other home nations. Robert served as a sergeant in the Royal Army Service Corps during the First World War. He died in November 1959 and is buried at Cathcart Cemetery on the south side of the city. Report by Anne Fotheringham.
From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 10th of May 2022, from the news section. Inquest into death of student linked to Peter Tobin begins. By Emma Sabiak. An inquest into the death of a student which has been linked to serial killer Peter Tobin is set to begin on Tuesday. Sussex art student Jessie Earle went missing from her home in Eastbourne in 1980, and her body was found 9 years later near Beachy Head. As part of the inquest, it is believed that the Scottish serial killer who killed 3 young women could be called to produce evidence. The 22-year-old student's parents won the right to a second inquest in December 2021, after a coroner previously ruled an open verdict when her body had first been found. Police Sussex concluded she was murdered in a cold case review in 2000 in an investigation dubbed Operation Silk. A pre-inquest hearing was told DNA has already been taken from her parents and police forensic experts are searching database for a match to any crime scene. Speaking earlier this year, Miss Earle's brother, James Earle, 66, said, "The original inquest left the verdict open, but the death of my sister was very clearly as a result of being murdered. Having the record set straight is important, even though nothing may actually happen otherwise. A verdict of unlawful killing is what we want. If it's possible to find out who did it in the end, that would be good, partly just to protect the public if that person is alive still and not in prison." Tobin, who is currently serving 3 life sentences for the murders of Angelica Cluck, Vicky Hamilton and Dinah McNichol, was living in the area when Miss Earle vanished. However, earlier this year, Sussex police said there is no evidence linking any named individuals to the student's murder. According to STV News, a spokesman for the force said, "We have no evidence linking any named individual into the murder of Jessie Earl. We understand the continuing anguish of Jessie's family in not knowing what happened to their loved one, and our thoughts remain with them. We will never close this case until and unless some resolution and closure is found for them." This article is by Emma Sabliuk from the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 10th of May 2022, from the news section. Police Scotland's firearms surrender campaign launches this week, by Esther Tarney. Firearms and ammunition can be surrendered in Glasgow and across Scotland as part of a campaign by Police Scotland. The event will run from Thursday, May the 12th to Sunday, May the 29th, and encourages anyone who owns firearms or ammunition without a valid certificate to give them up. Officers will also take replica firearms, air weapons, BB guns, imitation firearms, component parts, and other ballistic items. This can be done in any police station in the city and beyond. Assistant Chief Constable Alan Spears said, "The purpose of the firearms surrender campaign is to remove firearms from criminal availability and therefore reduce the risk of harm to the public and our communities. People will be able to surrender unlicensed weapons and ammunition to a number of dedicated police stations throughout Scotland, and I would encourage people to do so." Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Veterans Keith Brown said, "I would encourage anyone in possession of an unneeded or unlicensed firearm or air weapon to hand it over safely to police at one of their designated police stations." Firearm offences remain at historically low levels in Scotland, but by removing unwanted weapons, this important campaign by Police Scotland will help keep our communities safe and prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. This article was by Esther Tarney.
From the Glasgow Times of Tuesday, the 10th of May 2022, from the opinion section, "The Greens are now Glasgow's kingmakers. What will they do with the power?" by Katrina Stewart. What a difference a day makes. If the campaigning in the run-up to last week's elections felt flat or frustrating, and let's face it, it largely fluctuated between both, the results day was livelier than expected. Even compared to 2017, in the post-Brexit vote and post-independence vote fug, this year's local election campaign desperately uninspiring. For the main parties, there seemed to be little more effort than them all pointing the finger at each other and saying, "At least we're not that guy." Petty squabbles and national issues were the campaign's focus. Scottish Labour in particular played a blinder with an election leaflet highlighting issues that were not only not devolved to local authorities, but were not even devolved to Holyrood. Far from being a campaign on local issues, it was a messy stramash. Enter then the Scottish Greens. I interviewed new Southside Central candidate Elaine Gallagher at the Count in the Emirates Arena on Friday and asked her what she thought had led to the Greens' election success. What she said resonated. The party had asked local people what they wanted and then listened. Of course, it's more nuanced than that. Multiple factors come into play and you can't cleanly remove from the equation whether or not people want Scottish independence or how they feel about Partygate. Throughout the election campaign, when I asked, I said I thought constituents were genuinely concerned with the fundamentals, rubbish and roads. You can talk about constitutional politics until the cows come home, but people need to live in safe, clean areas, and it's that simple. The Tories, needless to say, were hamstrung by the shenanigans at Westminster, and there wasn't an awful lot they could do about that, particularly after party leader Douglas Ross's foolish decision to U-turn and back Boris Johnson. Absolutely, the SNP did very well. Labour is rightly delighted by its performance, but the standout success was the Greens. The SNP lost 2 votes on 2017 and came away with 37 seats, while Labour gained 5 to take 36 seats. The number of Tory seats fell from 8 to 2, including the loss of David Mackle. Mr Mackle had represented Pollokshields ward since 2007, and whatever you might think of his party's policies, for a long time he was a popular figure who worked faithfully and successfully to represent the area. He was one of the surprise losses in this election, alongside the SNP's Murray Hunter in Southside Central, to be replaced by Ms Gallagher of the Greens. Langside ward backed the Green candidate Holly Bruce with the most first preference votes, beating the current SNP council leader Susan Aiken. It was interesting to hear people express surprise that Southside Central would elect a Green candidate. It does a disservice to Danny Alderslow, a Green councillor who represented the ward back in the hazy days before Tory Glen was reassigned to Langside. But a year is a long time in politics and 10 years a lifetime, so perhaps Green input in the community is too distant for many to remember. By the close of play, the Greens had taken a historic 10 votes and now stand in the enviable position of being Glasgow's kingmakers. They could join forces with the SNP to make an SNP Greens coalition, as in the Scottish Government, and create a joint administration. Or they could go with a confidence and supply set-up, which would fall short of being a coalition, but whereby they agree to back the SNP on specific votes on budgets and spending, but get support in return for their own policy wants. The parties have already demonstrated they work well together with the Greens, and SNP joining forces on 4 out of 5 budgets in the last term. Anas Sarwar was asked last week whether his party would form coalitions in local authorities, and he said no, emphatically not. That's not to say local members wouldn't go against him, but it seems unlikely. What does seem likely is the Greens manoeuvring themselves into a position of real influence in the city chambers, whether they team up with the SNP or Labour or not. Glasgow already has some ambitious climate targets lined up in the coming years, such as becoming carbon neutral by 2030, and with the influence at George Square, we could see meaningful progress on this and other hot topics for the city, such as bike lanes, housing standards, and even the dreaded bins. Who would have guessed such a substandard election campaign could lead to this interesting new chapter for the city chambers? This article was by Katrina Stewart.
From the Glasgow Times, Tuesday the 10th of May 2022, from the news section. Virgin Media O2 expands gigabit network to thousands of Newton Mearns homes, by Nicole Mitchell. Gigabit broadband has been expanded to thousands more homes in Newton Mearns. Virgin Media O2 has announced today that it has connected more than 2,800 homes to its ultra-fast network as part of its Project Lightning network expansion programme. The homes are now able to benefit from Gig 1, which offers top speeds of 1130 Mbps, which is 17 times faster than the local average, and will benefit busy households that are working remotely, streaming TV shows and films, video calling, and playing games online. Christopher Matthews, Director of Construction and Delivery at Virgin Media O2, said, "Newton Mearns is just the latest town to benefit from our network expansion, where we've delivered our future-proof services, with speeds 17 times faster than the local average to thousands more homes. Whether it's kicking back with a classic on Netflix, downloading the latest Fortnite update on Xbox, or video calling on Zoom, thousands of additional Newton Men's residents now have access to the connection that can keep up with all this and more. Virgin Media O2 is the only major broadband provider to have rolled out next-generation gigabit services to its entire network of more than 15 million premises in December 2021. Customers can find out more at the Virgin Media.
From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 11th of May 2022, from the news section. Fish and chip shop supplier to open £1.9 million Glasgow warehouse creating 20 jobs, by Sarah Campbell. One of the UK's leading fish and chip shop suppliers and fast food wholesalers will soon open a £1.9 million warehouse facility in Hillington. Following its recent acquisition of Morrison's Food Services, Tea Quality have invested in a new Hillington Park Industrial Estate unit, which will lead to at least 20 new jobs. The Hull-based company already runs 12 distribution centres across the UK, which supply and deliver a variety of products to fast food outlets, care homes, and the wholesale fish market industry. Mike Crease, Managing Director of Tea Quality, said, "We are delighted to be able to move into our own customer logistics facility following our acquisition of Morrison's Food Service. The new site in Hillington Park is the largest of all of our depots and shows the exciting potential and plans which we will be laying down in Scotland. The site and our acquisition of Morrison's Food Services is truly a game changer for how we will operate in Scotland and really is an exciting opportunity for Tea Quality. Renovations will see the unit, which was originally built in the 1950s, transformed into an energy efficient space with internal offices and a yard built to accommodate modern HGV usage standards. Works have been undertaken by Insight Contracts, with EPC Associates being project manager for Fraser's property." Grant Edmondson, Commercial Director at Hillington Park, said, "It was a bold move by Fraser's property to commit nearly £2 million to speculatively redevelop this 1950s building, but we were confident that a high quality scheme would let quickly. Working with Tea Quality has been a pleasure. We're delighted to facilitate their expansion and retain their business for the long term at Hillington Park." And that article was by Sarah Campbell. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 11th of May 2022, from the news section. Glasgow teachers threaten strikes over violent pupil behaviour, by John Paul Holden. Teachers at a Glasgow secondary school are threatening to go on strike over violent and disruptive pupil behaviour. Union bosses say they will have no option but to consider walkouts at Bannerman High in Baillieston if meaningful steps are not taken to address the issue and protect staff, reports our sister title The Herald. NASUWT members at the school stressed they had been engaged in action short of strike since October last year due to the employer's failure to tackle persistent verbal and physical assaults. The union said that, despite this and ongoing attempts to work with school management, incidents were continuing. Staff have submitted 6 violent incident forms in just a few weeks since the end of the Easter holidays. NASUWT leaders also claimed behaviour policies were not being followed, with little effective action taken against pupils who are persistently disruptive. Teachers report that management are consistently failing to attend and support them when serious incidents occur. In addition, they say a culture has been allowed to develop where swearing at and disrespect towards staff are accepted, along with a refusal to follow rules around uniform and conduct. Data shows that Bannerman was the only mainstream Glasgow secondary school that did not exclude any pupils in the 2020-21 academic year. However, a Freedom of Information request submitted by the NASUWT has revealed there were 20 incidents of violence, aggression and challenging behaviour logged on Glasgow City Council's Health and Safety Management HANS system over that period. This is despite the school being closed by COVID lockdowns for part of the year. In the 2019-20 academic session, there were 41 incidents recorded at the school. Dr. Patrick Roach, NASUWT General Secretary, said, Members at Bannerman are increasingly worried for their personal safety and angry at the failure of their employer and Glasgow City Council to fulfil their duty to protect them and the majority of well-behaved pupils from violence and disruption. The attitude appears to be one of blaming teachers for poor behaviour rather than holding pupils accountable, and this has been aided and abetted by the misuse and abuse of restorative behaviour conversations, which members feel have become synonymous with no punishment or sanctions for unacceptable behaviour. No teacher should go to work with the expectation that they will be either verbally or physically abused. All teachers are entitled to dignity at work and a safe working environment. The learning experience of the majority of pupils are being undermined and disrupted by the City Council's failure to deal appropriately with the actions of a minority. We have given the employer every opportunity to address these issues. While our action short of strike action is supporting members to take more control of their own approaches to tackling disruptive behaviour, management needs to take responsibility. All our members want is to be able to get on with their jobs free from the threat of violence and abuse at work. Mike Corbett, NASUWT National Office Scotland, added, "Evidence shows that positive pupil behaviour stems from a whole school approach where management lead and support staff in maintaining good discipline. We want the behaviour policies which we agreed with the school to be enacted and consistently enforced, so that pupils are not only encouraged to reflect on their own behaviour, but that there are clear and consistently enforced sanctions for verbal abuse or physical violence. Members should not be treated with suspicion and disdain by their employer simply for standing up for their right to work in safety, free from abuse and harassment. Enabling a culture of abuse and harassment fails both pupils and staff, and our members are not prepared to gamble with their welfare any longer. Glasgow City Council has been contacted for comment, and that article is by John Paul Holden. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 11th of May 2022, from the news section, man due in court in connection with death of Amanda McAleer on Glasgow's Rye Road, by Sarah Campbell, digital journalist. A man is due in court in connection with the death of a woman in North Glasgow. Police were called to a property on Rye Road in Barmulloch at around 12:10 p.m. on Sunday. Upon arrival, they discovered that the 50-year-old, who's today been named as Amanda McAleer, had sustained serious injuries. She was pronounced dead at the scene. It has now been confirmed that a man has been arrested and charged in connection with her death. The 62-year-old is to appear in Glasgow Sheriff Court today. Amanda's family have issued the following statement through Police Scotland. Amanda was a much-loved mother, daughter and sister who will be sorely missed. Detective Chief Inspector Frank Travers of Police Scotland's Major Investigation Team said, "Our thoughts remain with Amanda's family at what continues to be a difficult time for them. Our inquiries indicate that this appears to be an isolated incident and there is no risk to the wider community. I would also like to thank the local community for their patience, help and assistance during our investigation, and to those who came forward with information." And that piece was by Sarah Campbell. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 11th of May 2022, from the news section, 3 ScotRail staff members attacked on train between Paisley and Glasgow, by Sarah Pacciaroni. Staff from a ScotRail unit formed to deter antisocial behaviour were attacked on a train, leaving 1 member in hospital. 3 members of the Travel Safe team, which was established in October, were attacked on the service between Paisley Gilmore Street and Hillington East on April the 15th. British Transport Police, BTP, said 1 staff member was treated in hospital and released the following day. It comes after a ticket examiner was left traumatised trying to eject brawling teenagers from another ScotRail service last week. A BTT spokesperson said, "Officers received a report of a rail staff assault on a board train between Paisley Gilmore Street and Hillington East stations just after 10 p.m. on April 15. 3 members of rail staff and a man suffered minor injuries as a result of the assault. No arrests have been made at this time and inquiries are ongoing. We have increased our high visibility patrols in Scotland following antisocial behaviour on trains. Unions have demanded more police on trains and said staff would boycott routes plagued by antisocial behaviour unless more action is taken. RMT Scotland organiser Mick Hogg said, "The travel safe team was challenged and assaulted. They are not the answer. We welcome more jobs, but travel teams are not there to deal with antisocial behaviour. We need more BTP visual at stations and on trains. It will no longer be tolerated staff being assaulted." Assaults on rail staff in Scotland increased by 11% to 72 between April and December last year, compared to 65 in the same period in 2019, BTP figures showed. Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth told MSPs in February members of the travel safe team bring with them a wealth of experience working from frontline customer-facing roles. She said, "This is a sort of public-facing initiative that we should be encouraging because we know that when staff are deployed in teams, even just a presence can act as a deterrent, helping keep the public safe." Scottrail said, "The team was designed to be a reactive resource with the ability to quickly focus on emerging hotspots. They actively engage and educate individuals and groups on the impact of unsafe behaviours when on or around the railway environment. We have seen a drop in reported events during and after the antisocial behaviour exercises." Scottrail Security and Crime Manager Stephen Elliott said, "The safety of our customers and employees is our number one priority. Antisocial behaviour, whether that's physical violence, verbal abuse or any other form, is completely unacceptable. Everyone has the right to go about their day in peace, so we will continue to work with authorities to ensure anyone responsible for antisocial behaviour is brought to justice." And that was an article by Sarah Pacciaroni. From the Glasgow Times, Wednesday the 11th of May 2022, from the news section, "Pollock woman terrified neighbours and shop staff," by Catriona Stewart. A woman left neighbours and shop staff terrified in two separate incidents. Paige Connell showed up at her neighbour's door around 3 a.m, shouting racist abuse and holding a knife. In a second incident, she threw scissors at staff who refused to serve her booze. Glasgow Sheriff Court heard how, on February 27th this year, Connell went round banging doors in her clothes and, at one door, she was heard to shout, "Let me in, foreign B, expletive deleted." The resident of the property was born in Latvia and took this to be a racist statement. Looking through the peephole of her front door, she saw Connell standing there holding a small bladed pocket knife with the blade open. Another witness looked through the front door to hear a banging, shouting and swearing, and also saw her holding a knife. They did not open the door as a result. Witness Elizabeth Miller heard shouting and banging too, and heard Connell, from Pollock, shout, "Rat B, expletive deleted." The neighbour opened the door and asked the 29-year-old to quiet down, as she had children sleeping in her flat. Ms. Miller believed Connell to be drunk and did not see the knife at this time. At 11 a.m. on the same day, the witness contacted the police to report the matter. Ms. Miller and another neighbour, Edgar Levitz, both saw a small bladed knife sitting on a table in the common close with the blade open. Police who attended both saw a knife sitting there too. In a separate charge, on April the 6th this year at around 9:30 p.m, Mohammed Ayub was working at a local shop on Drive Road in Linthouse when Connell came in. He and a colleague noted her to be substantially under the influence of drugs or alcohol. She approached Mr. Ayub, 47, to be served, but he declined due to her level of intoxication, and she became immediately aggressive. She said to him, "I'm going to smash the store up." Connell then turned her attention to Mr. Iqbal, 69, and asked him to serve her, but he declined, and so she became aggressive to them both. She shouted, "I will F, expletive deleted, smash yous. I'm going to burn this F, expletive deleted, store down." The two staff members were placed in a state of fear and alarm, Deputy Fiscal Josh Dowie told court, and both stayed behind the counter. Connell then grabbed a pair of scissors and threw them at Mr. Ayub. At this, the witnesses pressed a personal attack alarm, and on hearing the sound, Connell fled the store shouting, "You better no get me the F expletive deleted jail. I swear to God." Around 10 p.m, police arrived and viewed the incident on CCTV and traced Connell around 20 minutes later. While being arrested, she said to cops, "Just charge us and let us go." Due to her level of intoxication, she was taken to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital to be checked over. Her defence lawyer said, "These are very serious charges and she recognises that." He says his client has very little recollection of either incident. Sheriff Amil Ifala said, "Your behaviour on both of these occasions was absolutely appalling. You must have terrified those people, first of all your neighbours at 3 a.m. with a knife. You attended at both these places and caused havoc. You are very lucky I'm not sending you to custody today." Connell was placed on a structured deferred sentence, with the sheriff adding, "I am mindful of the fact you have some real difficulties that need to be tackled." Connell will appear before the court again in 3 months. And that article was by Catriona Stewart.
Evening Times, May 11. Lifestyle Memories. Glasgow football scout and Possil legend who discovered Kenny Dalglish. Report by Anne Fotheringham. Betty Dinny was delighted when her new husband Bobby proposed a honeymoon in the States to celebrate their nuptials. "What I didn't tell her," says Bobby with a giant smile, "was that 18 boys were coming with us to take part in a football tournament." He adds, "She was furious, but all she said was, 'I might have known.' And it was a great trip. We had a wonderful time." Betty clearly forgave her new husband, as the couple are still married 48 years later and have 2 sons, Robert and Russell, 5 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. "Betty is the love of my life," says Bobby, now 89, who lives in Possil Park. When he was a boy growing up on the streets not far from his current home, football was a great love of Bobby's life. He says, "Of all the street games I took part in, it was football I loved the most. Me and my pals started a club, Bardowie Rovers. We'd hire the local pitch for £1 a week. We had no strips, of course, so my mum told us all to bring her a white shirt and she'd dye it yellow for us. Of course it rains a lot in Glasgow, so by the end of the first game the yellow dye was running down our bodies." In 1948, Bobby joined the local YMCA, where Dougie MacDonald was General Secretary. "I wasn't that keen. I thought it was just for toffs," he says. "I had nothing. I was just a football daft boy from Possil. You had to go to the Sunday Bible classes. If you didn't turn up, you didn't get a game the next Saturday. But I started to enjoy it, played on the outside left. It taught us all discipline. And Dougie and I became great friends. He was a fantastic man and a monumental figure in the grassroots Scottish game." After his national service, Bobby played for Possil YM under-21s and then the senior team. In 1958, still in his 20s, he offered to manage the team to help out, as several men were standing down. Says Bobby, "It was supposed to be for a couple of weeks, but that was that. They never did recruit anyone else." One night at the Greenfield pitches, a man approached Bobby to ask about 7 of the young players. Frowns Bobby, "I was suspicious of him. He was all dressed up, fancy hat and shoes. He wanted some of the boys' names, so I asked him what his name was, and he said he couldn't tell me that yet. So I said I couldn't tell him the boys' names. He said he'd come to our next game, and that's where he told me he was the chief scout for Arsenal Football Club and wanted me and the players he'd spotted to come down for an all-expenses-paid trip. It was the start of a beautiful friendship with the English club helping out with sponsorship. They even threw in a minibus, says Bobby, and getting some of the best Glasgow players as a result. Many went on to do well, such as Eddie Kelly, who was part of the Arsenal team that won the league and cup double in 1971. That meeting also helped turn Postle YM into a legendary hothouse of Scottish footballing talent. The team became a feeder for the top English clubs, including Arsenal, Sunderland, Coventry and Aston Villa. Celtic and Liverpool legend Kenny Dalglish was one of the young players discovered by Bobby. In his autobiography, Dalglish calls Bobby something of a legend. He was a nice boy and a great player, of course, says Bobby. His dad was a marine engineer, and he'd sometimes run us to games in his van. He'd just pile us into the back. By the time we got there, we were covered in oil. Sir Alex Ferguson, who got to know Bobby when he was a young player with Drumchapel Amateurs, and later as a fledgling manager with St Mirren, said in a book Bobby wrote in 2007 called Scout, the Bobby Dinney Story. Bobby had the wonderful ability to spot young talent and nurture them to greater things, and his most famous boy, Kenny Dalglish, was testimony to his ability. Other Postle graduates included former Rangers players Gary McSwegan and Bobby Russell, St Mirren manager Tony Fitzpatrick, Jim Duffy of Hibs and Dundee, and Alan Moore at Stirling Albion. I'm very proud of what we achieved, says Bobby, refusing to take sole credit for any of it. I'm proud of all the boys. Bobby, who worked at the White Horse Distillery in Port Dundas for 36 years, before becoming head commissioner at the police headquarters on Pitt Street, went on to scout for Rangers under John Gregg and Partick Thistle. A photo of the presentation made to Bobby when he finally retired from Thistle, aged 80, has pride of place on his living room wall. He says, smiling, "It was a real honour. Sometimes I can't believe the life I've had. I have a wonderful life with a wonderful family." Report by Anne Fotheringham.
And that was this week's Glasgow Times news podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.